starting in about 10 seconds. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the annual L. Jackson Newell Fellowship Lecture. This is a tradition in the Honors College here at the U of U since 2019. And it's a really special event in our college in ways that I just want to take a moment to remember and to highlight for all of you. So this annual lecture celebrates the long and important tradition of liberal arts and sciences education. And for those of you who are first-year honors students, that's part of why we place this in the Ideas That Matter curriculum. This is an approach to education that has served humanity, scientists, artists, philosophers for thousands of years. It's both old, dating itself to eras where the disciplines were fewer and more connected, and it's also new in its adaptability and its applicability to the complicated challenges that we're facing in the present world. So the lecture started as a faculty initiative, and it was driven by many of the things that make me really love being part of the Honors College. And some of those include just a joy in learning new things and a deep value for the enterprise of scholarly and creative work that characterizes any great research university. A desire to forge community connections through a shared intellectual experience. And as the initial idea developed, we held a faculty meeting to talk about how we might name this annual lecture. And faculty chose to name it after L. Jackson Newell. So L. Jackson Newell was the Dean of Liberal Education at the University of Utah. This is a role that oversees what we now call general education, but it's rooted in that liberal arts and sciences tradition and in the idea of a liberated mind. So Jack is, by discipline, a historian and philosopher of higher education. But in keeping with his long championship of liberal arts education and of interdisciplinarity, he's also, and he told me I could say this, he's a poet, a forester, a leader in higher education, and someone who gives back to his various communities in countless ways. Jack's career spanned his role at the university, but also a presidency at Deep Springs College. And for a long time, he served as both professor and mentor within the Honors College, particularly involved with the Eccles Scholars Program. So naming an honors faculty fellowship after someone who's both a lifelong champion of liberal arts and sciences traditions and a champion of educational experimentation and innovation, I think really fits Jack's legacy and honors values. So since the inaugural 2019 lecture, each year a committee of honors faculty select a Newell Fellow from among the university's faculty, and they select people who do scholarly and creative work that fits within that broad liberal arts and sciences tradition, but they also look for people who are doing things that are really relevant in our particular moment. The awardee receives an honorarium that recognizes their work and delivers this public lecture. So I now want to turn the mic over to honors faculty member and the chair of the Newell Committee, Christopher Miller, and he'll give you an introduction to this year's awardee and her work.
How's everybody doing? Okay. I don't think anyone needs to be convinced of the urgency and relevancy of research into how political polarization changes the way we process information. Every year we receive many applications for the L. Jackson Newell Fellowship, and the work of Dr. Eunbin Chung stood out to us because it spoke to a problem that I think every one of us wrestles with on a daily basis, whether that's in the way we try to think through polarizing problems on our own, or when we take up these problems in conversation with peers, friends, and family. Aside from the opportunity to connect the broader honors community with contemporary scholarship at the U, the Newell lecture has also become a kind of keynote talk for the Ideas That Matter curriculum in our first year learning communities. I can think of no more relevant issue for students finding their way in the university than how we process information that might not immediately align or agree with our deeply held convictions, ethical principles, or even assumed patterns of reasoning. Just recently, I read a piece by Jack Newell, for whom the fellowship is named after, as you just heard, with the first year cohort of Ideas That Matter. The piece was called Liberal Education Rediscovered and was originally given as a talk to honor students. Jack wrote, and I'm quoting him, "In academic discourse, we generally confine our attention to matters that we can observe, directly or indirectly, and to claims that we can verify with evidence that reasonable people might consider seriously. The external quest, then, usually seeks to identify and understand what is in our universe, including ourselves, and how it all works. But can our scientific and aesthetic conclusions really be objective? Try as we may, our creative work and scholarship seldom meet that lofty standard. What we see, and therefore what we report to one another, is influenced substantially by what we assume to be true or hope to find." If I understand Jack here, I think he's reminding us that everyone, even scientists, make assumptions. And those assumptions can be based in part in a hope for something to be true. Where this hope comes from is something that we too have to study. To approach such hopeful assumptions with humility and critical self-examination is exactly what Jack describes as the inward quest of a liberal education. And it's also something that I think Dr. Chung's work can help us think about. Dr. Eunbin Chung is an associate professor in political science. She speaks or reads multiple languages, including Korean and Japanese, and maybe some French and Spanish. Her first book, Pride, Not Prejudice, National Identity as a Pacifying Force in East Asia, came out with University of Michigan Press in 2022, and it discusses the roles that affirmative national identities can play in building trust in international cooperation, particularly in the context of regional conflicts between Japan, China, and Korea. As an honors community, I think we can all learn from how Dr. Chung's work moves between disciplinary methods in order to answer what feels like complex but urgent questions. It's with that in mind that I'm excited now to welcome Dr. Chung to the stage.
Today, I want to tell you a story about how our thinking styles shape the way we interpret facts. In this project, my colleagues and I ask, why does public disagreement persist in the face of scientific data, especially on politically contentious issues? Let me start with a puzzle. It's the puzzle we've all seen before. Imagine two people looking at the exact same COVID-19 data. One person sees proof that masks work. Masks are effective in curbing the spread of the virus. The other, just as confidently, sees proof that masks don't work and concludes the opposite. How is that possible? And this isn't just about masks. We've seen this again and again in climate change, debates on vaccines, immigration, guns, elections, and so on. Raise your hand if you've seen something like this. People arguing fiercely over something, either online or on the news, even when the facts seem clear. Really? A disagreement on the internet? Shocking. Yeah, so see, this seems like a common occurrence, right? And the real question here is, why do we interpret the same facts so differently? And this puzzle lies at the heart of my research. During the pandemic, we saw something as simple as wearing a mask become politically charged. In fact, mask wearing became one of the most visible dividing lines in American politics. But why do we disagree so much, especially when so much of the data is given in numbers? When we're comparing two numbers, for example, it seems so easy and straightforward to say one is bigger than the other. So how is it we still disagree? How is it that something as objective as comparing numbers becomes so subjective? And masks are just one example, but again, this isn't just about masks. It's about how we process uncomfortable information. And it turns out our own thinking styles shape how biased we become. What do I mean by thinking styles? Think of the people you personally know. You might know someone who is a deep thinker, someone who's into effortful, careful reasoning, someone who leans more towards cognition than emotion. On the other hand, you might also know someone who feels more like a feeler than a thinker, someone who leans towards emotion. So my research team and I thought, maybe this difference in traits has something to do with why we interpret challenging data so differently. Who are the thinkers? Thinkers are the people who love stretching their minds. They enjoy tackling complex challenges, difficult puzzles, and math problems. What's wrong with them, right? For them, thinking hard isn't work, it's fun. Experts have labeled people like these as being high in something called NFC, which is short for need for cognition. On the other hand, you have the quintessential feelers. These people enjoy and willingly engage in emotion-inducing experiences. You might have a friend like this, someone who will happily walk into a movie knowing that that movie will stir up some intense emotional reactions. These people embrace emotions. And experts say these people are high in something called NFA, short for need for affect. And if you had the chance to study some psychology, you might know that affect is just another word for emotion. So in other words, these people have a high need for emotion. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to be one or the other. You might be thinking, I enjoy the emotional movie and the difficult puzzle, right? Which is completely fine. How many of you would say, I'm probably pretty high in both NFC and NFA? Raise your hand if you think that's you. Good, good. Me too. Same here. And that's completely fine. Equally, some other people might be high in neither and might be more of a numb potato. But the point here is, these two are not zero sum. So our question, in plain terms, thinkers, feelers, who's more prone to bias? And the destination I want to take you to today, in one sentence, is thinkers don't always know best. And the feelers weren't more biased than thinkers. Maybe that was more than one sentence. conventional wisdom would say the high NFC individuals, the so-called thinkers, would be the least biased. These are the people who are into effortful reasoning. So they will carefully process data and thus be more accurate. Conventional wisdom will also say the feelers high in NFA would probably be the most biased. After all, logic beats emotion, right? Emotion clouds judgment, right? But as you'll see, the story takes a surprising turn. Here's the twist. That conventional wisdom didn't hold. Thinkers were not always less biased. In fact, they could even be more biased. Thinkers didn't always use their cognitive reasoning skills to get closer to the truth. Instead, they used them to rationalize what they already believed. In this sense, thinking hard didn't always make you more objective, it made you a better defender. In other words, the people that you expect to be the most rational could actually be the most entrenched. How did we test this? We surveyed over 2,000 US adults. This was in spring 2021, when the issue of mask wearing was salient and heavily politicized. We gave everyone a tricky but solvable data task using a data table and asked everyone to interpret the table, interpret COVID-19 infection rates under a mask mandate. Here's what the participants actually saw. So we had two versions of our table, as you can see. Half of our participants were randomly assigned to see the table on the left, and the other half saw the table on the right. And everyone was asked, based on these numbers, did cities with a mask mandate see an increase or a decrease in COVID cases? And we made very clear that these numbers represented COVID cases after the mask mandate was implemented. Now here's the wrinkle. As you can see, the math is exactly the same on both sides. But there's one key difference. Anyone catch it? Yeah, exactly, perfect. The column headings are switched, right? And how would that change the mathematically correct answer for these two conditions? It's a harder question. Anyone want to try? Give it a shot? That's all right, we'll work through it together. So if you do the math, you'll actually see the answers flip. The left table points to a decrease in COVID cases, and the right table points to an increase. So the math was exactly the same, but the political implications differed for people. For some people, it supported their pre-existing views, and for other people, it challenged them. How do we know what people's pre-existing views were? We asked. We measured everyone's political ideology, as well as direct questions on what they think about mask policy. We also measured numeracy, math skills. Why? Remember those tables you saw earlier? At first glance, you might have thought, that's kind of a tough question. Or, that might not be the easiest problem for everyone to solve. And if that's what you thought, you are absolutely correct. Not everyone's great at math. Oh, maybe that's the explanation. Maybe that's why we disagree so much. Maybe it's not about politics at all, it's just about numeracy. Some people can't understand the data, so they just go with their gut reaction. Or they just go with whatever their favorite politician says, or political party, news channel, family, or friends, as a heuristic instead. To test this, we gave everyone a numeracy test, so a math quiz. Now, I know when I say math quiz, the high NFC thinkers in here are already wondering what that looked like. So why not try one together? Here's one of them. Now, looking at this, you might think, that's pretty simple. Or it might seem a bit tricky. To be honest, personally, I have to sit and think for a while to get this correct. But don't worry, this is not a pop quiz. You won't be graded on this. This is a safe space for math anxiety. So, why don't you take a moment and try to solve this problem? Okay, do we need more time? Are we good? All right, who's got it? Any guesses? Yeah, I think you were first. 5 cents, anyone disagree? Ooh, yes. You think it's D. Anyone else? All right, so we have a little bit of disagreement, which is fine. So the answer, if you do the math again, is actually A, 5 cents. And if you didn't get it this time, don't worry, you have just joined a very large club of people, including me, especially the first time I saw this. And if you did get it correctly, congratulations, you are officially numerate. But anyway, you get the idea. This is how we measured numeracy. Here's where it gets really fun. So on top of everything else, we told everyone, if you get the data task and any of the math questions correct, we will give you a cash bonus, a prize. So everyone was incentivized for accuracy with real money. I don't know why I said it like that. Money. Now that changes the game, right? Or does it? Now you have every reason to try. What do you think? If you were a participant in my study, imagine you were, and you encounter uncongenial data, meaning the information you got, the data tasks, did not align with your views, all you have to do is swallow your pride, even if it feels a little uncomfortable in that moment, but give the mathematically correct answer and take off with your free cash bonus. Go out and enjoy a free lunch. Or do you double down and still defend your political views or the views of your political party? But at what costs? Even when you're walking away from free cash? Because at this point, you are actively reducing your financial well-being. Dude, the free lunch is gone. So what's stronger, your wallet or your worldview? Finally, we measured everyone's NFC and NFA. Here's what the NFC questions looked like, borrowed from existing research. So everyone reported how much they agreed with these statements on a Likert scale ranging from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. And NFA was captured by these questions. Remember, the question we're most interested in is who gets it right and who gets it wrong when the data is uncongenial, meaning when the data goes against your priors. And now, let's see what happened. So, what happened? Before we even go into thinkers versus feelers, let's start with the big picture. First, we did an overall analysis of everyone, feeler, thinker, potato, everyone combined, to confirm that the more uncongenial the data, meaning the more distant your view from the data given, the worse you were at reading it accurately. So you read data in a way you'd like to read data. What does this tell us? We don't read numbers in a vacuum. We read numbers through a lens of who we are, what we value, and where we belong. This graph illustrates what I just described. As you can see, the greater the data uncongeniality, meaning the more you disagreed with the data, the lower your accuracy. This gives us a baseline. From here, we can move on to see how individual differences in cognitive styles, like NFA or NFC, shape the story. Is there a particular subgroup that's driving this behavior? In other words, who is the most vulnerable to the risks of biased reasoning? Which leads us to our second finding. Counterintuitively, for those high in NFC, the so-called thinkers, accuracy dropped when data contradicted their worldviews. So the stronger the drive to think, the more likely they were to interpret data in a way that reconfirmed their pre-existing beliefs. Evidence is shown here. Let's compare the thinkers with non-thinkers. This is where it gets interesting. If you break it down, you see that the thinkers and the non-thinkers don't respond the same way. The thinkers, shown in the solid yellow line, accuracy drops significantly the more uncongenial the data. On the other hand, if you look at the non-thinkers, their pattern is much flatter. Their accuracy stays steady. What this tells us is that thinkers might be more sensitive to ideologically uncomfortable information. What about the feelers, our high NFA folks? Surprisingly, we find feelers are not less accurate. In fact, NFA did not predict how inaccurate you were at all. So being more emotionally attuned didn't mean you reasoned in a more biased way. Let's look at this graph that compares feelers and non-feelers. Focus on the solid red line of feelers. Now I know what this looks like. As data becomes more uncongenial, feelers' accuracy creeps upward. But I must tell you here that that pattern, statistically speaking, was not significant. So statistically, this means that we can't say feelers' accuracy actually improves with data uncongeniality. But it's an intriguing hint. Directionally, since the slope is positive, maybe feelers do process information more carefully when it's uncongenial. If you look at the non-feelers, their pattern was flatter. They seemed less affected by whether the data was congenial or not. So even with the exact same numbers in front of us, the way we engage with them depends on who we are. Remember, we also measured numeracy. And here, math skills did matter. The more numerate you were, the better you were at solving the data task overall. Not surprising, right? But here's the catch. Even numeracy couldn't erase bias. So when the data was uncongenial, bias stuck, even for those who were the best at math. Remember, these are the most quantitatively sophisticated, numerically intelligent folks who are best equipped to understand numeric data correctly, right? But even for them, bias overrides numeracy. These findings challenge how we think about polarization. It's not just about ignorance or emotions. Sometimes the smartest thinkers, the ones who love to reason, are also the best at twisting facts to fit with their worldview. Why might strong NFC decrease accuracy? While high NFC individuals might engage with a greater volume of information, the information they seek out might often already be consistent enough with their viewpoints. Their higher cognitive engagement can serve to more intensely reaffirm their beliefs or attitudes. In a polarized time, the very tools we use for careful reasoning can further entrench us in our priors. This helps explain why debates on climate change, vaccines, or elections stay so stubborn, even when the facts seem clear. What are the real-world implications? Scientific evidence and political information is almost always delivered in numbers, percentages, statistics, charts. But here's the thing. Those same numbers don't land the same way for everyone. Persuasion isn't one size fits all. And this matters Because if political leaders and policymakers don't understand how people hear the numbers, they risk talking past the very communities they're trying to reach. Now, let's return to the two people still staring at the same data. Why do they see opposite truths? Our study suggests that it's not just all about politics, it's also about how you approach thinking itself. If you remember nothing else from this talk, remember this. Loving reasoning doesn't guarantee objectivity. We're not saying, boo, the thinkers are the bad ones, or that you should try to not think carefully. You should. The irony is that a strong motivation for reasoning may not free us from bias. It may just sharpen our ability to defend it. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge my co-authors. We are a team of women immigrants. We get the job done. That was a nerdy reference. Sorry, it's from Hamilton, the musical. So, yes, and of course, thank you all for being here and for your attention. So, I am super excited to welcome your questions, I promise. But before turning things over to you, I actually brought a few questions of my own. Think of it as a warm-up to kick off the discussion. Okay, we'll start with an easy one. For anyone who would like to answer the questions out loud, I suggest you please state your name, your year, and your major so we all get to know each other a little better. Okay, yeah, we'll start with an easy one. Number one, why might thinking harder sometimes lead people to be more biased instead of less? Any ideas? Yeah, right here. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And can you please say your name? Wonderful. Okay, so Xavier mentioned confirmation bias. So as was mentioned in the talk, we might see things or interpret facts through what we already believe, through a certain lens, right, is the idea. Very good. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Yeah. Nice to meet you, Jacob. Wonderful. These are awesome, awesome answers. Okay, so yeah. Sorry, what would be a key word from what you just said? Right, thank you. So yeah, high NFC people have those cognitive resources and the reasoning skills, right? Just as Jacob was mentioning. So that could be another reason. Wonderful. Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add, or are we ready to move? Yeah, in the back. Yeah, that's great. Can we get your name, please? Okay. Thank you, Mitchell. So yeah, that's right. I would guess that there definitely is a personality factor. I haven't done that research yet personally, but I would guess that if someone is interested, you all are researchers or future researchers, right? You would find very significant effects with personality. I think that's definitely a very important observation. Thank you. All right, moving on. I love it. Okay. This is a bit of a more personal question. So, do you see yourself more as a thinker, a feeler, a both, neither? How do your thinking and/or feeling tendencies shape the way you process news and information, especially when it's uncongenial? Okay, anyone want to go? Yes.
I, sorry, I just want to mention we have these microphones here if you want to get up and talk to the microphone.
Oh,
then we
thank
can all
you.
hear you.
No, it's okay. Okay, yeah, cool. I can hear myself. Hi, I'm Cole. I'm a freshman. I'm studying finance. I'm a thinker, for sure. I feel like I overthink everything all the time, and all new information is interpreted in a certain way that I feel spirals a little bit, if you catch what I mean, kind of. And so I think when data comes in that challenges what my existing beliefs already are, it makes me reconsider my existing beliefs in a way, even if they're like super, super solid. Like if I hear something about like, oh, like this major makes more money than this major, it doesn't matter how much I love whatever major I'm doing, like I'm gonna reconsider like, oh, am I in the right field? Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. That was excellent. Yeah, I think that was a really nice catch. So maybe even if you are a super thinker, if you're aware of these biases or the mistakes your mind can make or the tricks your brain can play on you, you can become more aware and maybe redirect the cognitive skills you have to correct yourself or update your beliefs a little better than you normally or previously would have. Do we have one more person for this question or? Yeah, right here. Mhm. That's fantastic. So maybe if you feel like you are a bit of a thinker and a feeler, you can use that to your strength, right? You get the best of both worlds. I like that answer. I'll try to do a better job looking to the sides as well. Okay, question number 3. It's a little harder. How could these findings help us understand political polarization today? And this could even just be one example or anything you can think of. Hands up. Yes, please. Mm. Yeah, yeah, totally. I agree. Anyone else? Okay. I understand this was a bit of a harder question, so we can move on to the 4th now. Oh no, it's even harder. Okay. Imagine you're a policymaker trying to communicate scientific data about anything. You can pick your example if you want. How might these findings change the way you present information to the public? Think about it for a second. And when you feel ready to give it a shot, you can raise your hand. Anybody want to go? Oh, yeah, right here. Yes. Yes, I think that's very true. And as scientists and researchers, we're also subject to our own biases, right? And it's difficult, like was just mentioned, if you have a diverse community you want to speak to, how do you account for that diversity? Um, some potential ideas that I brought with me. You might avoid assuming that simply giving people more facts will reduce bias. When you find it's very hard to convince the other side, I don't know how often it is that is because they just don't have more facts. Um, and instead of just giving people more facts, you could tailor communication strategies to different audiences. We were just talking about diverse audiences, considering not just numeracy, but also thinking styles and affective styles, so emotional styles, right? You could reframe messages, bring trusted messengers that don't further entrench people into their beliefs. And also directly address identity concerns, because who speaks also matters. And think about who will resist the facts more and try to strategize accordingly. Okay, so these are the questions that I brought. Now I am open to receiving questions that you might have for me or anyone else, all of us.
There's one over there too, if folks want to ask questions over there.
So, how do we use this data to recognize bias within ourselves and recognize when we're using, like, when we're over reasoning to make things make sense and not actually, like, looking at the data in an objective way?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. It kind of connects to how we were saying before, if you have the cognitive resources and reasoning skills. And I think a lot of it comes down to awareness. If you're aware that you're also only human and are also subject to the same kind of biases we all are, I think that awareness can help you make that effort to try to correct some of that. And that's why studying psychology is important, I guess, to help you try to, get out of that, I guess, common heuristical path that we're all subject to, and try more even-handed reasoning that's not defensive.
I have a question on the methods. So I'm wondering, you mentioned that the people would rank themselves on how thinker versus feeler they were on a scale. But then it's presented as a binary, right? Sorting people into one category versus the other. So the first question would be, where was that cutoff in terms of like, I don't know, if you were somewhere in the middle, how would you treat those cases? And then similarly, where were the people actually distributed? Did you see people like 50-50 on the extremes, more in the middle? And then if those cases are in the middle, how do you treat those?
Yeah, this is a very good methodological question. Thank you. So we did have the feelers and thinkers on a continuum, like the question asker suggested. In terms of the cutoff points, we went with what previous research did. It's always good to look at the precedents of the subjects that you're studying. I can't remember the exact number of the cutoff points right now. I kind of wish I had my co-authors in this room. It was about 30 or 40%, but we tried to group the most extreme feelers and the most extreme thinkers for clearer results, so we don't have a lot of noise mixed in.
I'm actually just extremely curious on what inspired you to have this as like to go into this? What inspired you?
Thank you. That's a great question. So this study was conducted at a very uniquely polarized time, right? And so as scientists, we also kind of wanted to take advantage of the situation we were in. Has anyone heard of a field experiment? Yeah, so you can take advantage of what's naturally happening. What we didn't wasn't exactly a field experiment, but we did take advantage of the opportunity of what was happening at the time. So for example, there's a study that I can remember where a psychologist, and he was living during the time of the Vietnam War, was able to compare people who self-enlisted to fight in the Vietnamese War and then other people who involuntarily had to participate. And they found that the people who self-enlisted, maybe as a way to overcome their cognitive dissonance of enlisting into such a difficult task, reported higher satisfaction of the experience of war. So that's kind of how you would do a field experiment, take advantage of something that's already happening anyway and comparing two different conditions. We were inspired by these field experiments and tried to do something like that. We are developing more projects on political polarization that are similar but a little bit different. So this is all ongoing research. It's in flux. Who was?
I had a question. This is kind of something really important for a lot of people to know. Do you think the responsibility lies in the individual to understand this information and apply it in their life, or rather on those presenting data to present it in a way that, kind of gets rid of that bias and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like it might be a bit of both or what we can do best, right? So as consumers of information or data, we can try our best to, again, accept or receive data in an even-handed way, if possible, as humans. For those that are sending out the messages, it might come down to what interests they have in sending out the message. Is there some sort of are they entrepreneurs or politicians? Do they have a certain agenda in sending out the information? But if possible, if and when possible, if both sides could kind of try to even out the bias as much as we can, I think that would be closer to ideal.
As a result of this study, have you noticed yourself within your day-to-day life using logic to confirm your own bias? And how did you come to realize that? And what did you do to correct it?
That's a great question. Let me think. Yeah, I feel like I am always subject to bias so much. Again, like I was saying, I try to correct it when I can. Working with a wonderful research team helps. Let me talk about robustness. So in order to make sure or add confidence that your findings are indeed clear and robust, people like to add more measures of the same thing, over the similar concept. So I told you that we measured people's political ideology, and we actually combined those with the political party that people supported. So that was one measure of uncongeniality. The second one, as I said, was direct questions on how do you feel about mask policy. Let me just show you. Yeah. So these were the questions people saw when we asked them, their opinions on mask policies. And then, again, to add robustness, some existing studies rely on self-identification of political ideology. So basically you ask people, how liberal are you or how conservative are you? But then when you actually talk to people, sometimes you notice, this person is saying they're conservative, but when you actually get into a conversation, it kind of feels like they're not really supporting conservative policies at all. So rather than just a self-positioning on a scale, we borrowed two additional measures that gauge political ideology. And The first one is basically how much you agree or disagree to governmental interference in your life. This has been used in previous research as another robust way to measure political ideology. And there was a fourth measure, which basically gets at how you feel about social justice issues in general. And our results were consistently significant across all four measures. I know this isn't the most viewer-friendly way to present data, but if you see, so we have four different ways of measuring congeniality, and NFC was consistently and statistically significant. So this is one way we try to correct for our own bias, just add in more measures, different ways of measuring the same thing to see if the model still holds.
You answered part of my question when you talked about asking about how they thought about mask policies, but did you also check to see what people knew about masking data? Like, I imagine if someone had seen 3 sets of data talking about how masking was effective, then you showed them the chart that says it was effective, like, it'd be harder to convince them of that data, regardless if they're like NFC or NFA.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this did occur to us, thanks for asking. Maybe people just didn't believe the data table. For example, if you're a strong believer of masks and their effectiveness, and you happen to be in that condition where you get this data table that says COVID cases actually increase with masks, I mean, how do you answer that, right? So we did have additional questions on perceived reliability of the study. So after participants answered to the data task, we asked, how reliable do you think this study was? Or how well do you think this study was done? So maybe if you were in that uncongenial position, but you kind of want the cash prize, so you give the mathematically correct answer, you kind of had that chance to vent after that and say, yeah, I gave this answer, but this study sucks. It's really not well done at all. This is stupid, you know? So that kind of gets at that difference, and we're still analyzing that data.
Hi. So I was just wondering if you did this experiment again in 2025, how would everything have changed? Because you did everything during COVID. So I was just wondering if that would have changed any of the results.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks. So we were talking about how we were taking advantage of the time and everything that was happening. Maybe that's such a unique time that the results are different if we do it in other periods of time. I'll redirect the question to all of you. What do you think the results would look like? Would they look different if we were to do this study today? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. This was such an emotional issue for everyone. Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. There are replications of similar studies on those different issues. I did a similar study on immigration, whether an open immigration policy increases or decreases crime. And the issue definitely has a difference, and also the community you're talking to. I did the immigration study in South Korea, and this was a time where, was it 44? A good number of Yemeni refugees landed on Jeju Island in South Korea, so this was a very salient issue in the news. So the issue, the timing, all things would make a difference. One thing I was a little surprised about was I thought NFA individuals could be less biased, could be more biased before I saw the results, because your partisan identity can be very emotion inducing to some people, especially if you're high NFA, right? So maybe if you're a super feeler, protecting that partisan identity is that much more important to you, so you will cling more to your political beliefs. But that was just a hypothesis I had that wasn't correct in this study, at least. Ooh.
So I think we'll just have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi. When statistics are presented in a way that's like unclear or the conclusion isn't like very apparent, it leaves it up to interpretation for those people that are looking at it. And so maybe the thinkers, when they interpreted your data tables, they were trying to draw on their life experience and things like that to understand it. And maybe that's why your conclusions were the way they were. I'm wondering if you considered that during your study.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation. Thank you. So we did make clear that you should answer just based on the data table. And in addition, one of the co-authors on the team is an economist, and this might not mean much to you, but it also means just by the department culture in economic style experiments, you can't have deception in your experiment, so you have to tell people the truth. So we did actually clarify that this is fictional data, but still people were so, like if it's fictional data, just do the math and get the cash and leave, right? But still people were very, very, closely clinging to their political beliefs. Yes? Yeah, maybe if they did have that perception, they could release it in the reliability questions. They could say the study is so, sloppily, messily done that I couldn't understand. Or there was always an open-ended question where people could freely express their views, because that's qualitative research. It takes a little more time to go through all those comments, but we'll keep an eye out for those. Thank you.
Could we give our presenter a hand?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.